Welcome to TradeTheNBI.com. This is John. This report is for the 29th, and wow, when you think about it here, we started August at a whopping, on the ES that is, 2164, and we're at 2168.50. So we've gone nowhere pretty much, and it's been relatively modest within that. Now, we had some decent movement on Friday because we actually dipped down too from all these little short signals that were popping up as we kept decaying here. Boom, finally, dipped below the green line. It's about time. I've been waiting for it. So that was the big excitement for the day. We played it beautifully. Follow along if you did on the Skype chat. It was quite nice. Captured quite a series of runs. Now, NQ's been this long extended uptrend moving forward here. And finally, a couple of days ago, broke above with the cyan, which is an indication that shorts took an active role. But they faded out of that pretty quick, so they were happy with the small gain drop that took place, which is fine. This is kind of what we'd expect. Same thing with the Dow. Again, we were looking at the situation of, okay, when they dip below the green, as long as you stay below, you're fine, but if you move back above, you want to turn to the long side on that. We've already got the Dow now oversold to some degree. Shakeout is now broken to the negative, so this is actually a lot more bearish than the other markets are indicating at this particular point. Oil sort of flattened out, had that nice run, started to retrace some of these positive extremes. That one had already been done, and now the full retrace of this last bar down here, which was 1070. It's seen some activity, so that's fine. It's looking pretty flat at this particular point. Wouldn't be expecting anything to do major pop-wise unless there's some major reduction in inventories, which is unlikely given the pretty weak GDP numbers, which just means more Fed interaction as far as manipulation of markets, not necessarily from a positive step. And yes, of course, they still, oh yes, we're absolutely going to raise rates now that things have improved so much. And we've heard this for now, how many years? Same story, everything. And everyone's, oh yeah, they're about to raise rates. And no, they can't raise rates. There's nothing happening at this particular point that justifies that they have the ability to do that, given where the economy is. I mean, a small rate increase would definitely turn things into negative growth very fast. Gold, not very excited about anything that's going on. Not a whole lot of saber rattling that's caught anyone's attention just yet. TLT, again, I don't see the value in bonds at this point, pushing that up. The euro's been a fun trade. We saw the nice pop up with the cyan moving below red as that began its march there. Got a little overbought midway, and we talked about this retrace being the 111.7. Oh, how low did we get? We got to 111.801. So what was the exact low? 107. I would say the open there, 108.21, was more than adequate, but already eclipsed that. So shakeout's still falling and cyan's still rising, so this particular point still looks lower rather than higher. And here we have the 4-1 case chart, very nice to use. It's pretty decent action overall. Pop back and forth with the little short actions that developed here. You'll notice on here I have the ERH, the expanded ratio histogram, orange. Normally I hide that information that I use for turning the colors with it prior to, but it's always good in my view, and particularly I can show it to you in the 5K because it's a little bit more poignant as I'm working with the broader program, which I think that probably letting out in the next, well, probably for the next run, because with the computer crash, finally found someone in Florence who can take a look at it. They say it could take a week or more to look at the system and see if they can salvage anything. Who knows what happened to it and why they have to, because it's an all-in-one setup. It's not like you're not able to run the diagnostics. So the partition or something's been damaged, which is not a good thing from what I understand. So, but regardless, I'm going to be going through a variety of different setups that you can utilize to, and they'll be incorporated in our short configurations so that you'll be able to see why all of a sudden there'll be a change in color that won't particularly be associated. What it would get is some parabolic moves, like in this particular case, a DOC spread that's developed. And once you have the DOC spread, the orange ERH above 7 is really typically the point at which we look at it, where this dotted line happens to be right there. And then what you do is you just wait for it to cross below the green DOC. And once it crosses below the green DOC, you have a flex point typically where there's going to be a turnaround. Now there's usually a second wave to that where you then come back above the cyan and then the second move down, and that can produce very large moves. I don't know if we have one of those visually that we can see right here. Well, this one close enough. Pop up there. Now in this particular case, you've got an interesting one. Below the 13.5 is actually bullish. And usually what I do to indicate that is I put 2 arrows, a down and an up. Just so, because boom, you turn around, hit the MBI, and then it marches on forward from an upside. So once you had the dip below, that was the cover point, even though the short was like literally a bar earlier. That can happen, but at least you know that there's been a flip take place, and you can adjust to it, and then you get obviously the bigger runners that well, can be significant in this particular case. Well, here was the 3 spread, because actually when we were looking at this one with the rise, there was the first one that started right here, which was the move above 7. So that's your first short. You look for the dip below the green. At this particular point came right about here, but it was still in a negative read, and in no case had moved above. And typically what the machine will do at this particular point is it will adjust the stop from what was the original one here, an ATR base. It'll do more likely than not ATR times like a 1.5, or 3 point something like that in this particular case. And that would be, you know, just right up here. And that reduces the exposure dramatically. And at this particular point, once it crossed back above the steel right here, then you just wait for that orange, and it moves back, forth, trickles, boom, 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 all the way down to right about here. So that was at 63, the original entry at 83. That's 20 full points without really even having to think about it. There was no adjustments that needed to be made. Those are the kind of clean approaches that we're looking for establishing it. And so what you'll see is this will turn red. I may even have some of these colored. Maybe I'll have them turn the candles orange so that you'll know that it's a particular type of trade as opposed to, or I just may put the word up above it. Easy enough to do either of those. So those are some of the things that will be incorporated, but you're not going to have to learn any of this. You're not going to have to be looking for any of these setups. It's just going to appear in the colors and make the move. And yeah, in fact, all these MBIs won't even show up. You may see an asterisk just as I put them, but using this as a turnaround flex point, I won't even need to include those as much. You just see solid red, and I find probably that giving less information is a little bit more clear in some cases. I'll still, of course, have the indicators, and I'll go through the setups and how they work, but that doesn't mean that you'll have to use them. Just trying to make it as simplistic for visual gathering so that there's not a conflict of, well, if this one's moving, this one, no. It'll be straightforward. Now, it's interesting because these will correspond oftentimes perfectly to the shakeout returns with the yellow moving to the upside. And so it becomes one of those where within the decline, you don't have to worry about little moves in the shakeup up and down, because this becomes a singular move. You don't have to do anything in between it, which I think is convenient. That way you're not like, oh, this one popped up above, or, you know, because you can get those anomalies once in a bar here and there. This way that won't even be a factor that you'll have to take into account. Now, it only works when you have movement above a certain level. Otherwise, you're just in muck when you're in this kind of area, which is an interesting one too, because it lets you then know what are buck periods. And oftentimes it's best to avoid jumping around back and forth on those, and you can just stay neutral to them, or biased to the direction that was established prior to. So I think those are all good things. Very excited about that, and just putting the language together that we'll start doing them, and also adding inputs, because I want to have variable flexibility for you on not just ATR, but whether the point balance, depending on the chart you're using. Some people not always comfortable with the size stop of a full ATR move. So this will be adjustable. And the fact that when those signals come in and you get this move, what it would do is if the bias is still short and you don't have a close above that long, it will reduce the stop to barely 3 points above, so that at any point that would be stopped out of that move as long as it still provided significant gain. And in other cases, depending on how the chart configurations are with the extreme in that, it may just close it out completely and go to a neutral stance. So a lot of variability with that, but that I think is going to make it more tradable, which is ultimately the goal. And then some people say, well, but that 5K tick chart will be perfect, but what about 50K or some other version? And we don't know. We'll be able to look at those. More likely than not, they'll all be fine. But the reality is, when you have a horse that runs 6 furlongs and wins every race, do you really need to race at 1 mile? No, you don't. You can just stay with the 6 furlong race. So the ultimate idea was to stay with a tiny frame chart that you would be able to trade as though it was both a long-term and a short chart. And I think that's just about what we've achieved here, where we're able to capture on a very small scale, a 5K tick, in fact, the ability to capture large directional moves as opposed to being whipsawed around. And ultimately, that has been a major topic for most people because they're not as active a traders or want to jump in and out. And these will provide easy, definable alerts as well. So you can get the interesting signal that says short, and then once that orange moves below, you just get an alert that says, the orange moved below, go and adjust your stop. And you can click on your phone wherever you're at doing whatever and make the adjustment that simply. So anyway, that's where we're at. Continue to look for me on the Skype chat. As always, though, trade well. We'll talk again later. And I'll be getting indicators together to send out for the next month. I'll continue to put the videos on our Skype chat until I can attempt to resurrect the website producer that will update. But I believe I will be able to update the archive. So I think that even in the archive portion, that will still be updatable. So we'll go from there. As always, trade well.